So have you ever had the experience of somebody who tries to help you sincerely, but they always seem to get it wrong? Their help always just gets in the way, frustrates, gets annoying, does exactly the opposite of their intention. And they have good intentions. We're talking about a person who really sincerely wants to help you, but somehow their moves are always the wrong moves. The help they give is always off the mark. It's unwanted, unnecessary, makes things worse, more complicated, and you end up having to do more, work harder to fix the help that they've given. Ever been in that situation?
Yes.
Ever been on the other end of that? We hope not, right? We hope not. We can all, probably all of us, can readily identify people who do gooders, try to help, but make it worse. Whether we do that ourselves may be harder for us to recognize, because that do-gooder doesn't recognize it. They never realize that they're doing the wrong thing or making things worse. On the contrary, they feel and are convinced that they're helping you. And they get extremely frustrated and upset with you or with anybody else who they're trying to help, who doesn't seem to appreciate what I'm doing for you. That here I am, I've gone out of the way, I've put time and effort and love and everything, and look at the thanks that I get. You're annoyed at me or upset at me or you don't appreciate me, and they're very frustrated. But the fact is, their intentions may have been good, but they weren't being very helpful. What are they missing? Why is this person getting it wrong all the time? And how are they different to the other type of person who gets it right, who knows exactly what to say when, what to do when, how to help, how to be there, how to not be there, when to step in, when not to step in? What is the talent? What is the skill? Sensitivity. Mm-hmm. That's a fair gamble, that one. That we're going to talk about the various faculties of the soul and figure out which one it is. Because you can be kind and not considerate. You can be a person who is a kind person, giving person, generous, but not considerate in your giving. Can you? Can you be considerate and not kind? So we'll have to analyze that question. Can you be considerate and not be kind? You can certainly be kind and not considerate. That's the person who's helping you but not helping you, who's doing all these things for you that just makes life more difficult. It's kind. They're doing out of kindness. They're not trying to frustrate you, but they're not considerate. They're not really aware of your needs. They're not in tune with the situation. And so their kindness is misplaced. Whereas considerate is where you think it through. You're sensitive to the needs of others. And that's a totally different character and character trait. Can you have that without being kind? Can you be considerate and not being kind?
Tough love.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what it said.
Yeah. So tough love. How does that work? Who?
Usually a parent. Yeah. They consider the thinking of what's best for the child.
Mm-hmm. So we call it tough love, which is like sounding like a contradiction in terms. Tough and love wouldn't usually go together, you would think.
Some people think it might be good, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not a very good.
Right. Right. So all of these terms, considerate, kind, love and tough love, cruelty, they all come to particular categories of our character. And the door just closed. Specifically, they fit into the next triad of human emotions in the 10 Sefirot system that we've been going through. And the next three are called Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet. And tonight we're going to get to know these three faculties and understand how they work, how they're different, and think of examples of people who could be one way or the other. Because each one of us have all three, but we're strong in certain areas and we may be weak in others. So this triad of Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet, Chesed literally is translated as kindness. Gevurah is literally strength. And Tiferet means beauty or harmony. But as always, the translations don't work. You have to unpack a bit further these terminologies. The Hebrew term holds in it many different meanings. One English word is not going to do it for any of them. So Chesed is not just the attribute of kindness. It is expansiveness, expressiveness, outwardness, a move from me towards you.
Generosity as well.
Generosity would be part of it, yes. It's much broader than just doing kindness. It is a move from me to you where I give of myself to you. Gevurah, its opposite, which translates as strength, but Gevurah is much more inwardness, discipline, harshness sometimes, toughness. And these two powers are opposite powers, and we all have both, but all of us tend one way or the other. Each one of us will have a strength or a proclivity towards one side, a bit more chesed or a bit more gevurah. Some people are extreme chesed, and some people are extreme gevurah. But all of us have both. So what would an extreme chesed person be? That would be a person who is extremely generous, very giving, very kind, loving, outward, always offering of themselves, giving of their time, volunteering for others, putting others first, and others' needs before theirs, looking to do good. It's not just that they do good when they have an opportunity to do good. A chesed person to the extreme needs to do good. It's my personality, it's my being, it's my entire existence is about giving to others. If there's nobody to give to, I'm frustrated because I can't do what I'm born to do, and that is to give. So I'm not waiting around to help somebody, I'm outwardly going to seek somebody who needs my help, and I'm giving it. The epitome of that in the Torah is Abraham, the forefather of the Jewish people. He was called the man of Chesed, the epitome of Chesed. In fact, in the Kabbalistic writings it says that the divine attribute of Chesed, the Sefirah, the attribute in heaven of Chesed, while Abraham was alive, the attribute of Chesed said, I'm unemployed, I have nothing to do. He is such an epitome of Chesed that you don't need the heavenly version, you've got it on earth. He absolutely lived the life of Chesed, of generosity. We see this in the few stories in the book of Genesis about him. All of them really express this idea that he was known to be extremely hospitable, that his home was open on all sides, bringing in guests, feeding anybody, no matter who. He was completely non-judgmental of anybody. who came into his home. And not only he fed guests who came to him, but he was outwardly seeking them. In fact, we're told that he was commanded by God to circumcise himself at age 99, which is tricky. And after doing that, it was a very hot day, and he was in pain from his operation. But he was upset because he had no guests. What bothered him was that there were no guests. Not that he'd just been circumcised at age 99 3 days ago, but there was no guests around because it was a very hot day. God had made it hot, so he shouldn't be bothered by guests, so he could recuperate. And he was upset by that. That frustrated him. Because his attribute of chesed was so much, it's so boiled up inside of him, that if he couldn't give, he was missing something. That was more painful than any physical pain. And so he outwardly went out to find guests. What type of a parent do you think he was? What type of a father was Abraham? Extremely loving, extremely kind. But perhaps towards indulgent and maybe even spoiling his kids. Somebody who's an extreme chesed person is all about giving to the extreme, and that giving can sometimes be indiscriminate. It's not whether you deserve it or not, that's not in the equation. It's just giving because I have to give you. And so, just like he was indiscriminate with who he served as a guest in his home, so too with his own children, he was indiscriminate with the love that he poured and showered upon them. Which meant that there were no favorites. He loved them all equally. His children were all loved equally. But it also meant that if his children misbehaved or weren't doing the right thing, they got away with it. Because in extreme chesed, the love doesn't judge. And so he just loved and loved. And that caused problems. It meant that not all of his kids turned out the way he was, with his morality and his goodness. Not just his chesed, he had a beautiful chesed attribute, but there's also morality, being a good person, being a moral person. There are some people who are kind, but they're immoral, they're dishonest. Abraham was extremely kind and extremely honest and straight and righteous. But with no discipline, with absolute kindness and love, and only positivity towards his children, it meant that they could get away with whatever they wanted. And that's really dangerous when it comes to kids. Because a child, by definition, needs guidance, needs borders, boundaries, needs to know right and wrong. How far is the line that I can push and beyond which I can't go? Where is that line? This is why children do misbehave. Because they want to know where that line is. They're looking to the parent to see, how far can I go? When can I stop? And if there's no response, if I could just keep going, that is very unsettling for a child. As much as we would think that kids want to be just free to run and do what they want, no, they thrive on being given direction. And when adults pass that responsibility to the kids to find their own direction, that is unfair. It's giving them a responsibility that they can't handle. They need to know where the line is. But Abraham couldn't give it. He wasn't a line drawer. He wasn't a disciplinarian. He was the loving father who just loved and showered with love. And when there's no lines, no borders, no boundaries, so then a naturally good kid who has an inner sense of discipline might be okay, but the average child that needs direction is going to suffer from that. Interestingly, Abraham had two sons. Later he had more children, but early on he had two sons, Ishmael and Yitzchak, Isaac. And they went very different paths. Ishmael veered from the path of morality, didn't stay on the straight and narrow. And the sages do attribute that, at least partially, to Abraham's overflowing of love without discipline. Isaac, on the other hand, was the exact opposite of his father in nature. He was an extremely disciplined person. He was the epitome of Gevurah, the opposite side. While Abraham was the man of Chesed, Isaac, his son, was the person of Gevurah, who epitomized Gevurah, and therefore he worked out okay. He didn't need Gevurah from his father, he had it internally. But he was the exact opposite. As sometimes happens, when parents are one extreme, children often go to the other extreme. What is Gevurah? Gevurah is inwardness. Not this outward giving generosity, but a very inward, controlled and disciplined type of character. Introspective, reserved, and rigid. So, interestingly, Isaac in the Torah, we don't hear much about him. There aren't many stories or illustrations of who he was, which itself is the story. He was an inward person, a Gevurah person. He wasn't so out there. He was much more of an internal spirit. So there wasn't all that much to say. But that also means that he was extremely structured. That he had a very clear path, a sense of inner discipline. In his case, to the extreme. He was a Gevurah to the extreme. So what would a person be like who's an extreme Gevurah person? If we met the extreme Chesed person who is this generous, giving, out there type, so the extreme Gevurah person would probably be a bit more of the stingy type, not all that sharing, would be much more judgmental, meaning analyzing, do you deserve this? If you deserve it, they'll give it to you. They're fair. They're not mean necessarily, but you have to actually deserve it. You have to have earned it. And if not, you're not getting it. And in the extreme Gevurah, you have to really earn it. No leniencies. No easy rides. You have to really have earned what you get. They'll be a very organized person, the Gevurah person. They have clear boundaries. They have a schedule. They're reliable. Much more predictable as well. They can tell you exactly what they're doing. They can account for every minute of their day. They'll be on time to the appointment. They'll probably be there 20 minutes early because they never miss. They stick to their schedule. This is very different to our Chesed friend. The extreme Chesed person never quite makes it on time. Even though they try to, they can't actually just make it on time. And it's always the same story, that they intended to, but there were so many other things they had to do. And on the way to seeing you, there was somebody else they saw, and they couldn't just ignore them and just walk by. They're helping you, but they're also helping others, and they can't say no to anybody. Because the extreme chesed person can't say no, because no is a Gevurah word. They're always saying yes. So they can't quite keep to their schedule, because keeping to a schedule means saying no to everything but what's on now. And that's a Gevurah thing. A chesed person doesn't have that if they're in the extreme of chesed. So who do you want to be doing a favor for you? Well, depends how urgent. It depends how exact. Do you need the favor done at a very specific time? Well, then you might need the Gevurah person. But is it a big favor? Is it a favor that is requiring going really out of one's limits and beyond for another person? The chesed person does that really well. The Gevurah person will do exactly what is needed, what you deserve. They'll do it on time, but not necessarily more than is asked for. They're not flexible, the Gevurah person. They're self-disciplined, and they know what they can do, what they can't do, and that's all they're going to do. Which makes them much more reliable. As a parent, an extreme Gevurah parent is going to be tough. They are going to set down the rules very clearly, and there'll be no mercy. There's no getting away with stuff with an extreme Gevurah person. As strict as they are on themselves, they are on others. So they're self-disciplined, and they'll also discipline others. So there's no leeway. There's the rules, and that's how it's got to be. No flexibility on that either. Which, of course, in the extreme, would not be such a great situation. A person who's extreme Gevurah, just like the person who's extreme Chesed, there's going to be some fallout there. Not everyone's going to be able to handle that. No flexibility at all. Such rigidity and such harsh discipline, that's not going to work for everybody. Just like when there's extreme chesed, when a parent is extremely giving, lenient, generous, and giving to a child, we call that spoiling a child. So an extreme Gevurah parent that's always coming down harshly and always has high expectations and there's no flexibility at all, that's called an overbearing parent. And a child will suffer from that, will be quashed. Their freedom will be quashed, their expression, their confidence. So the extreme chesed parent could almost tend towards neglect because they're just letting the kids do whatever they want. The extreme Gevurah parent is the opposite. There's not neglect there, but it's harsh. It's too harsh. So our sages say that Isaac, who was the extreme Gevurah, it also didn't work out so well with his kids. I wouldn't say such a thing about our forefathers, but our commentaries do. They say that you see that they were extreme. They had to be. Abraham was bringing the extreme chesed into the world, which was then balanced by the extreme Gevurah of Isaac, because they were developing the Jewish people. The fathers of the Jewish people brought about these elements into our souls, so they had to be extremes. It wasn't a mistake. But there are consequences. Extreme chesed, there's going to be a kid that will go off the rails. Extreme Gevurah will also send some kids off the rails. So Isaac's twin sons, Jacob and Esau, Jacob turned out really well, Esau not so much. So then Jacob was the third generation, the third of the fathers of the Jewish people, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If Abraham was the extreme Chesed, and Isaac was the extreme Gevurah, so who was Jacob? So the Kabbalists identify him with the attribute of Tiferet, harmony, a harmonization of the two extremes of Chesed and Gevurah. He was the son of Isaac, but he was the grandson of Abraham. He took those two attributes, the attribute of Isaac of Gevurah, but the attribute of Abraham of Chesed, and he encompassed both to personify a third attribute, which is Tiferet. Tiferet is not just a mixture of Chesed and Gevurah, it is an inclusion of both Chesed and Gevurah because it has its own identity that can handle both. What is Tiferet? Tiferet is empathy. Tiferet is sensitivity. It's the awareness of the needs of others, being in tune with the world outside of you, and being able to apply the correct attributes, the correct character traits, the right measure at the right time in the right place. To illustrate Tiferet, there are some people who have a very strong Tiferet. They are people who are very in tune with the people around them. They're very aware of those around them and of their needs. They pick up on the signals from people around them, and they're very aware of it. There are some people who are quite weak in Tiferet. They're oblivious to those around them. Not that they don't care about anyone, they're just not in tune with those around them. They're not so tuned in to take in the feedback that is coming back to them. So, when you're with a Tiferet person, when you're in conversation with them or spending time with them, they take cues from you. Are you tired? We don't have to do this now. Or sorry, did I say something wrong? Or you liked that one, didn't you? Like they can hear your response and take it in. Not only your response, they're aware enough of you to know what they should talk about and what they shouldn't talk about, what they should say and what they shouldn't say, how best to say it. They have a sense of your presence, and so they will shape their persona, their presence, based on your needs, on the needs of the situation. Let's give an example of a teacher in a classroom. A really good, skilled teacher in a classroom will be one that has a lot of Tiferet. You can have a Chesed teacher, you can have a Gevurah teacher, and you can have a Tiferet teacher. The Chesed teacher is somebody who is very loving to the students, very, very generous and giving of their wisdom, and very lenient, lets the kids get away with stuff. Not a disciplinarian. So again, like the parent we spoke about, a Chesed teacher will not be able to control the wild kids in the class. The good kids who are listening will gain a lot because the Chesed teacher gives a lot. That's what Chesed is, giving. But the kids that are not listening, that are misbehaving, will get away with that because the Chesed teacher just lets them. The Chesed teacher will give praise to everyone. It's indiscriminate. Everyone wins a prize with the Chesed teacher. Whether you tried or you didn't try, whether you listened or you didn't listen, whether you achieved or you didn't achieve, whether you behaved or you didn't behave, none of it is relevant. Just out of love, everybody gets. Which, as nice as that sounds, it's not really so nice because it rewards bad behavior. It doesn't recognize those who did make an effort. And the class doesn't thrive as a whole. The extreme Gevurah teacher is the opposite. There's a points system in that classroom, and you better score the points. You'll be recognized if you make effort, or if you excel. They'll be fair, a very fair system, but you've got to earn the points. If you do the wrong thing, there are consequences. And in extreme Gevurah, they'll come down very harshly on those who are doing the wrong thing, which will work for some. Some just need a good taste of Gevurah. But some will just be totally squashed. Their personality will be squashed by it. They won't feel any love from that teacher. A Tiferet teacher means the teacher themselves may be very Chesed or may be very Gevurah. We will never know. Because a Tiferet teacher means one who gives each student what they need, who is aware enough, knows the students enough to know that this student needs a pat on the back and a bit of encouragement. This student needs a bit of a harsh response. This one I should ignore. This one I have to give a lot of attention. And each moment of the class is aware of the whole classroom and of each individual. That is a great talent to have, a rare talent to have. That you can do that on a scale of an entire room, where you can sense each person and their needs. You have to be very, very tuned in for that. But a person with strong Tiferet will be that way.
I can see Gevurah good in the army. That's probably and someone's got Asperger's who never be Tiferet, so it happened.
Interesting. Yeah. That awareness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it can be developed. It can be worked on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, can there be a negative side of Tiferet? We saw Chesed, how extreme Chesed is spoiling children. Extreme Gevurah is being too harsh, too cruel, to coming down too hard. Is there an extreme Tiferet?
Do you mean extremely balanced?
Can you be? Can you be extremely balanced?
If you're balanced in both, then maybe there's something missing in that. Because sometimes it takes a little bit of, Chesed or a bit more of the, you want to make.
Oh, so if Tiferet means an equal amount of Chesed and Gevurah, so then it wouldn't be empathy, because sometimes it shouldn't be equal. Sometimes you need to tilt one or the other. So if Tiferet means being sensitive to the moment, it means you have the powers of Chesed and Gevurah, and you know when to emphasize one over the other. Which sounds great. That's perfect. That's wonderful. And indeed, Jacob, the third of the patriarchs who embodied Tiferet, had a very big family of 12 sons and probably just as many daughters. And they all stayed with him. They were a family like any other family, but they all stayed on his path. They got his message because he was Tiferet. He knew when to express Chesed, when to express Gevurah. So could there be a downside to that? Could there be a negative version of Tiferet?
I'm just thinking about the school teacher. Could it be that they spoon feed? So they're so in tune that they almost provide the path for the answer before the person can even develop themselves.
Well, that's an interesting example. Spoon feeding in teaching would actually be Chesed. A Chesed teacher would do that. A Gevurah teacher, apart from the disciplining side of things, there's also Gevurah in the style of teaching. Chesed is to spoon feed to the old way of writing on the blackboard and everyone copy it down. Like, this is the information, here it is. It's all from above to below, a one-way giving. Whereas a Gevurah teacher, using Gevurah in teaching, would mean throwing out a question and you have to figure it out. Because Gevurah is more inward, is more drawing you in. So instead of feeding it all to you, giving it to you, I'm actually teasing it out of you.
So more of an independent learner.
Yeah. So a Gevurah teacher would be the extreme of that. So a Chesed teacher would be great for certain students who don't think independently, they just want the information and they just take it in and memorize it. And probably younger kids need more of that. Young kids need to be given the information much more because they have the ability to memorize and to just absorb much more than critical thinking. As a child develops, so they need much more to participate in the learning, to be active in it. And a Gevurah teacher, or the ability to use Gevurah in teaching, would be to not just answer the question, but to direct the student to work it out themselves. So a Tiferet teacher should not be spoon feeding, should know exactly how much to feed and how much to let the student initiate. When to answer and when to say, you figure that out.
Sometimes you've got to take an extreme approach to get the best out of the person. And that extreme approach may not be a form of negotiation or a diplomatic approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like some politicians take this very measured, balanced way that leads into nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe extremity is needed at times
Mm-hmm.
for action to take place.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
The Tiferet person was responsive and used their ability to gauge those cues of each person. Would that leave a question about who, like the integrity of that person, in terms of who they are, if they're
Yeah.
just being responsive?
Yeah, I think, like both of you said, in an extreme Tiferet, if you're totally taking cues from outside, from the other, so who are you? Like, where's the you there? It can actually be an extreme Tiferet person. The corruption of Tiferet would be where I'm like this chameleon that changes colors based on the needs of the situation, but like there's no me. I'm never asserting myself. So they lose themselves. There's no personality. You could actually lose personality there. Sometimes you have to just be you, like it or not. People have to just like it or not. You can't always be so sensitive to your surroundings that you're just adjusting for everybody else.
Well, it's not really transformation. Not necessarily transformation. Like extreme brings transformation, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
But that sort of balanced approach doesn't bring change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess if you think about it, if you on the receiving end are always getting what's right for you, is that good?
No. You don't know how to respond when you don't.
You have to also sometimes know what it means to be left out, or to be forgotten, or it wasn't for me.
Because you don't grow up. It's like the kids who will get certificates and no one's really won or lost. So it's meaningless.
Yeah, so to feel uncomfortable is also a talent that you need to learn. It's a skill that you need to develop to not always feel totally comfortable and totally catered for. So I guess an extreme Tiferet person could be quite a slime bag, if you think about it. They'd be a great con artist. They would know exactly who to say what to.
Or diplomat.
Yes, that could be that could be a positive side, but it could be, you could see how it could be misused. If I know exactly what you want to hear, then I'll be a good salesman. But is it real?
If there's diplomacy but with intention, then it's actually very, very good.
Yes. Yeah, well placed, this could be very good. But in a relationship with an extreme Tiferet person, sounds great, but extreme Tiferet, if it's too extreme, so who are you? It can't always be what I want. What do you want? I want to get to know you.
They might not even know.
Yeah. So really, we all have all. We all have Chesed, we all have Gevurah, we all have Tiferet. We all have all three. But we all tend either to Chesed or to Gevurah. Some people extreme this way, some people extreme that way. And then I would say the Tiferet is another gauge, is another scale. You have your either Chesed or Gevurah tendency. That's one question. The first question is, am I more Chesed or am I more Gevurah? Am I the person always giving? Or am I a person who is much more controlled and disciplined? Am I all over the place or am I rigid? And how extreme, this way or that way? A little bit this, a little bit that, somewhere in between. If you're not sure, ask people around you, they might be able to tell you. And so most of us are not extremes. Most of us tend a bit this way but have a bit of that. And some of us more than others. That's the Chesed Gevurah continuum. Then there's your Tiferet measurement. How Tiferet are you? How aware are you of others? How sensitive are you of the situation? How in tune are you with the person who you're talking to? So some people have no tact. They just say, and like, how could you say that in front of that person? This may be one area of Tiferet that somebody may or may not have. Whereas others are very diplomatic. Will always be careful to say the right thing at the right time. So it's not that they're mean, or it's not that they're cruel or even rude. It's just that they're not so aware, not so in tune with the actual situation, the surroundings, the recipient. You know, going back to a teacher without Tiferet could be speaking to a class that's not listening. No one's listening. They're throwing paper planes. They're asleep. They're just not with it at all. And that teacher won't notice. Or they'll be teaching on a level that is just not appropriate for that classroom. It's going over their heads. But they don't notice it. They just don't realize. They don't see how bored people are. So they might be very intelligent and a skilled teacher, but they're not connecting. There's no sensitivity to the audience. And so it could be very boring. Whereas a Tiferet teacher will catch on if the crowd they've lost the crowd, change the subject, tell a joke, do something else. So none of these three are innately good or bad traits. Even though Chesed sounds good, Gevurah sounds harsh, and Tiferet sounds very, very important, none of them are innately good or bad. Misplaced love is not love, or it's not good. And Gevurah, harshness, discipline in the right place is actually extremely good. Like tough love that was mentioned earlier, that when a parent or a teacher disciplines a child, there are many ways of doing that. You can discipline a child out of anger. You're angry with what they're doing, and so you shout at them. We're human beings, we get angry. Parents and teachers and everyone gets angry. And sometimes out of anger we respond in frustration. So that is a form of Gevurah, but that's a negative Gevurah. That's a bad Gevurah. That is just being harsh, and that's not for the good of the child. It's out of your own frustration. And so that will be picked up. Everyone knows when they're being shouted at because you're angry, not because of what I did. So I don't have to take responsibility for your bad mood. So it just doesn't work. Whereas a well-placed act of Gevurah, of discipline, is very effective. When you know exactly what you're doing, you're conscious of what you're doing, and you know that this child needs to be put into place, they need to be given boundaries, and so I need to, in a stern way, lay down the law in a way that they will respond, they will feel it. But I'm in total control of that emotion. It hasn't gripped me. I'm in control of it, and it's for the sake of the child. That is Gevurah. That's a very good Gevurah. In fact, the Kabbalists say that even though we painted Gevurah and Chesed as being in two corners, in actual fact they intertwine. There is Chesed within Gevurah, and there's Gevurah within Chesed, which means that sometimes an act of Gevurah is inspired by Chesed, and an act of Chesed could be inspired by Gevurah. What's an act of Gevurah inspired by Chesed? The example we just said. If I love my child, I need to discipline them. And so I can discipline them, and that's my love being expressed in discipline. That's Chesed being expressed in an act of Gevurah. That because I want my child to thrive, so I need to lay down the law for them. But if I do that in a lovey-dovey way, that will not be effective. If I say, my gorgeous little Babela, why don't you maybe put the knife down? That's not going to work. I've just made a suggestion, which the kid doesn't agree with, and I haven't expressed that there is something urgent that needs to be done right now. That knife is not to be played with, and you need to put it down. And that has to come across in my voice. I might have to take action and grab it away from them, but I have to be tough now. Is that mean? Is it mean to take a knife away from a little kid? The kid thinks so. But that so-called cruelness, that's Gevurah, but that's Gevurah. There's an expression of Chesed. If I wouldn't do it, it would be cruel. If I'd let the kid play with a knife, that's cruel. So Chesed, kindness, love can be expressed in Gevurah, and they work together. And what about the other way around? Can you have an act of Chesed that is actually an expression of Gevurah? If disciplining my child out of love is Gevurah, an act of Gevurah that is an expression of Chesed, can I have an act of Chesed? What I'm doing is Chesed, but the inner purpose of it is actually Gevurah.
If you want them to be bothersome, say for example when they're learning, you need to express your love through the action of giving them structure and giving them a discipline of that structure, and they may not like it. So you might say to them, 3 hours every night you need to study this, and even if they don't like it, because we know that isn't the only way for them to succeed.
But that's the same, that's true, but that's the same as the disciplining out of love. I'm giving structure out of love. What about the other way around? I'm giving love, I'm doing an act that is a chesed act, but its intent is actually gevurah, is actually disciplining.
Yes, you could definitely do that.
How?
That by offering a gesture of love, the opportunity to reflect or join the dots could be like there could be an internalization of something or understanding of something through that love that could potentially be more accessible and potent for that person to gain some insight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what would be an example? Sometimes the harshest punishment is actually being loving. If, let's say I know that my kid has done something wrong, naughty, against me. So sometimes by me being really loving to that child, they feel a shame, a sense of shame of how could I have done this?
My father used to do that very well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be in tears with him.
Yeah,
I had to check that.
yeah. It can be very effective. That it's an act of chesed. The external trappings of it is being loving and kind, but it's in order to discipline and to say to cause the child to realize that I've done wrong. It's like it says sometimes expressing love to an enemy is the worst punishment. When somebody is trying to annoy you, trying to get under your skin, and you just smile at them and embrace them, that's a slap in the face, but in a way of chesed.
So maybe a sense of shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, because, sometimes somebody's trying to aggravate you. So to respond, you're giving them what they want, and you're just furthering the conflict.
But don't you have to have an audience for that? Not everybody reacts in that way.
Correct. You have to probably have a bit of Tiferet to know when this would work. Because it could really backfire.
Sometimes it's good to diffuse arguments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It does. It works. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw somebody say that they do this on social media, which is a hive of ugly behavior, where people just feel free to say the worst things and the worst insults, hiding behind their identities. And somebody who received a lot of these.
It's only some with social media.
Yeah.
I work with social media.
Yeah,
so
but there's a
there's a
lot.
lot of other side of it.
For sure.
The personal stuff is what you
Yeah, the comments.
Yeah.
So this person, whenever somebody would put an insulting comment towards them, they would respond with compliments. Like, I love your picture of yourself, you look great. You know, a sincere, nice comment. And it actually worked a lot of the time. It would disarm the person. It's a slap in the face. That's what it really is. But it's doing it with kindness rather than fighting back and perpetuating. It wouldn't always work.
I think I give you imagine some situation where the guys were fighting and the other guy suddenly kissed the guy on the cheek and the other guy said, oh no, he didn't know how to respond. And as you say, disarmed him.
Yeah. So be careful where you try that, but it definitely it exists. The point is that it exists.
It's quite passive aggressive, isn't it?
Not necessarily.
It can be sincere. It can be.
But when you're trying to disarm someone by giving them a compliment instead of...
Well, like, I used to have it with my mum if I'd get really cross or angry at her when I was 14, and she'd just come out and say, like, I love you and all that, and I'd just, be like, I've done the wrong thing. And so, like, that was just being honest, like, she was just being kind
But
to
that's
me.
different because that's already a real relationship. This is kind of dealing with whack jobs on social media. You know?
Yeah,
So you don't know
it's a different example. It's definitely a different example, but it can work.
The disarming thing.
So the purpose is disciplining, but the expression of it is love. That could work too. So as opposite as these forces are, but they intertwined as well. There's Chesed in Gevurah, there's Gevurah in Chesed. And so, and then there's the power of Tiferet. So our friend who is always trying to help, but getting it wrong, who is always giving and generous and giving of their time, but just misplaced all the time. Who are they? What type is that? That's Chesed in the extreme. Chesed is indiscriminate. I'll give you whether you like it or not. I'll help you, but the help is not necessarily what you need. It's just what I'm giving, and I'm giving and giving. It's beautiful. It's such beautiful giving, but like where? It's just random shots in the dark. Really, you're just giving whatever you are. It's coming from kindness. We shouldn't misjudge the person as not being. That's a kind person, but it's not a considerate person. It's lacking Tiferet. It's lacking the sensitivity, the awareness of should I be giving or not. Sometimes don't give, and that's what's the right thing. When you're a guest in somebody's house, so you want to help. That's nice, but do they want you to help? Or not really? And is what you're doing helping? So it might be nice to, clear the table, but hang on, we're in the middle of eating. Or where are you taking that? Or while you're visiting someone's house, so I'll just fluff up your bed as well and just and fix. That's not actually helping. So, an extreme chesed person just doesn't differentiate, doesn't distinguish, and is just giving, and it's all over the place, and they will get exhausted. They get exhausted from giving because nobody appreciates it, and they get so much negative feedback. And when they finally realize that and they see that people aren't appreciating it, they don't understand why. Because I'm giving so much. You're giving, but you're not giving what I need. And that's an exaggerated extreme. We all do that on some level. Our chesed is where I decide I want to help you, but I maybe didn't think if this is the help that you need. Sometimes the help is to stand back and to not get involved. Sometimes it is to get involved, but to find out what will help the most. To not make assumptions of this is what you need, but to actually try and hear. And then sometimes you do need to take initiative and just help. Sometimes when somebody says, no, I'm fine, you have to hear in that no, I'm fine is, no, I should just help them. You need to know when you should just do it. So the Tiferet person will have that really to a T. They'll know when the no, I'm fine is I'm going to help anyway. But they'll know what type of help you need and what you don't need. They'll listen to you, what you're saying or what you're really meaning, and they'll be able to actually truly help. So even though we're all born with certain tendencies, some of us are more Chesed, some of us are more Gevurah, some of us have great Tiferet, some of us are a bit weak, and we probably won't switch entirely. An extreme Gevurah person is not going to become an extreme Chesed person, and vice versa. But we can work on our weaker side as well. We can develop it to be a bit stronger. If I know that I'm really, really very Chesed, so that's good and that's beautiful, and I should develop and flourish in that area. But I do need to maybe work on a bit of Gevurah. Maybe I need to be a bit more structured and work on being a bit more disciplined. And it's not natural to me to do this, but I've got to learn. If I want to be effective in my relationships, in my own life, I need a bit of discipline, and I'll need to fake that. I'll need to adopt it. It won't be natural, but I need a bit of that. And I might need help from somebody who's good at it. And if I'm extreme Gevurah as well, I need to lighten up some Chesed as well. I need to loosen up. And it's also not natural, but I need a bit of that. And whatever level of Tiferet I have, I can work on becoming a little bit more aware of my surroundings and more sensitive to the needs around me. Because we all come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We all have all three, and we can work to develop them to be a much more functioning and giving person, but giving in the right way. Okay. Any questions, comments? Good. Maybe I misread the crowd. Everyone's half asleep. I don't know.
So a spy would also have a good Tiferet.
A spy would be extreme Tiferet, yeah, because they would have to take on a whole different persona and be very aware of their surroundings, picking up all the signals around them. Yeah.
Even more so than a diplomat.
Mm-hmm.
And a psychologist
Yeah.
would have a mixture of teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But imagine, a spy who's been behind enemy lines or in a foreign country and has to go home after that. Like, can you go back to being you after you've been so aware of your surroundings and so responsive and acting a part? Can you go back to being you?
You have to find
Yeah.
you first.
Mm-hmm.
You like an animal that's always used to being on high alert.
That's right. Or like an actor
Yeah.
who takes on a role and sometimes
And loses
keeps
it.
it. And even just on a more daily basis, empathy and feeling somebody else's pain, but you also have to be able to come back from it to be you. Especially if it's in a professional basis where you're seeing a lot of people who need your empathy, but you need to actually be able to walk away from that too. Switch off your empathy as well.
Not easy.
No. Okay.